Om Shanti. So this is our second session where we're going to look at the word stable. And there's this big difference between being still and being stable. Some people think that if you're motionless in meditation, it means your meditation is good, but that's physical. Anything which is in perfect balance is moving slightly. I remember as a child there was a book which was a sort of child's scientific book, and that I had, and they would give questions. How can you balance a needle vertically on the edge of a bottle, which is also vertical? Do you know how to do that? Try balancing a needle on the edge of a little bottle, and what will happen? It will fall down. And so they said, okay, the answer is what you have to do is you have to stick one end of the needle in a cork and stick lots of forks in the cork so that they come out, and then it'll stay there. So balance is connected then with being able to hold steady, but something in perfect balance is constantly shifting. Another analogy that you can think about is when you're focused. If you focus like straight like that on something, probably it will give you a headache. Have you tried that? Meditation, totally focused point, give you a headache because it's rigid. And so the best thing to enable really good focus is something that is spinning. So, for example, in sport, if you want to send a ball really far, you spin on it and go where you want it to go. Because a spin creates the effect of gyroscope. A gyroscope is stable and steady. So gyroscope is a very important instrument for yogis. And where do you find a gyroscope? Normally on submarines and spaceships and big ships. Because in your inner ear, if you've got one there, probably, because we have to be balanced, right? And we get balanced through our ears. But I never thought about having an internal ear gyroscope, but it's a good idea. But anyway, a gyroscope is like a frisbee, and or you can have a different kind of gyroscope as a bicycle that's going this way. And as long as your bicycle wheel is turning, you will not fall down. But if you stop, then you have to put your feet down or you will fall down. So this is the instrument that's needed for stability in terms of metaphor. So Baba gives us a very interesting gyroscope, which is the Swadarshana chakra. And we have two different kinds of Swadershan chakra. You know these, right? One of them is golden, silver, copper, iron age. You go around like that. And then the other, he calls it the five forms. And I think it's because mostly everyone refuses to spin the cycle of golden, silver, copper, iron. And why would you refuse that? And one of the reasons is because you don't like to lie, do you? So to spin the cycle, you have to say to yourself, I am a deity, but you're not. And you'd be worried about saying I'm a deity because you think, well, maybe that's arrogant. Maybe I'm trying to become a deity, but I can't really say I'm a deity. So I'm not going to say that. A warrior is no problem. PKs are always fighting some sort of Maya one way or the other. So warrior is okay. And then the next one is merchant, which is you make deals. Okay, Baba, I will do 15 hours of meditation and you fix my stage or sort out my relatives or make deals. So that's okay. I can be the Vaishya, the merchant. But no self-respecting Hindu will say, I am a Shudra. Can't do that, right? I am a Shudra. No. So you can do half the cycle, but not the whole cycle because of these two extremes being unacceptable. So Baba will see that nobody is spinning the cycle the way he wants them to spin. But nevertheless, it's quite a good idea to think about these extremes. And I think that the recent couple of Murlis in which he said that, usually you're used to him saying, do not perform any negative karma, right? And you may have storms of Maya, but don't act on it. And then now he says, you will perform negative karma and you will pay for it, and it's fixed in drama. So that's that. And you say, what? And this is very deep because it forces us to have a different relationship with our perception of our own dark side. Because usually people prefer our dark side is dark, so nobody can see it, so nobody knows, so let's just keep it that way. And then you see on the other side, your brilliant side, your deity side. Well, that's out of the question because I don't really know what deity is. And if somebody starts worshipping me, I think I'm going to feel very uncomfortable about that. And I don't want to be sitting in a temple all day long, just, like that, stuck. So, and I'm not 16 celestial degrees, completely biceless, completely non-violent, and Mariata Purushottam and all those things. Now, I'm a Purusharati, I'm getting there, you see. So we can't really include that because of our idea about right and wrong. And you see, a Shudra is like completely unacceptable if you're not a Shudra. So Baba says, well, anyway, these castes that you have in India is, it's a social convention where there's no social mobility. And Gandhi wanted to take out the caste consciousness, and so he called all the people who were fixed in the Shudra caste, he called them Harijan, right? Harijan means people of God. Because otherwise, in the traditional Hindu, very strict sections of Hinduism, if you're a Shudra, you're not allowed in the temple because you're unclean, you're not okay, you're a toilet cleaner, so not allowed. And even they have separate doors in the houses where the Shudra will come in, clean the toilet, go out again, and not. So it's a very, very extreme social setup in regard to caste consciousness. And a lot of people who come to BK are very, very religious, devout Hindus. So then to say, I am Shudra as well as I am a deity is totally impossible to consider. But yet he says, no, you have to know that you pass through all these extremes, all the way from being the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, because that's the meaning of 84 births. That's the meaning of going around the whole cycle. That's the meaning of the moon going all the way from full moon, which is 16 celestial degrees, all the way to the new moon, which is just a thin line, no degrees. And this is you. And you say, because it's like that. So he says, in so many Murlis, you are Swadarshan Chakradari. You must be able to accept your highest and your lowest. And you say, well, theoretically I can do that, but practically not. He says, no, I'm talking about practical. And so it means that we have to come to terms with all the different variables that exist within our soul, all the way from the brightest and the best to the darkest and the worst. Because that is called self-realization. And normally in different spiritual study places, self-realizations mean I realize that I'm the best of the best, but it doesn't include I realize that I'm the worst of the worst as well. It's only in BK that we get that. And so this is all to do with stability and stabilizing the self, because we cannot activate this gyroscope without accepting to be the highest and to be the lowest and keep it moving. So if you have a spinning top and you put all the colors of the rainbow or something like that on this top and you spin it, it will come white, right? Because light is like that. If you put it through a prism, it goes to the colors of the rainbow. And if you put those colors of the rainbow on a little piece of cardboard and spin it through a matchstick or something, it'll go white. And what that means from a metaphorical point of view is that when you accept totally the highest of the high about yourself and the lowest and the low about yourself, and you spin that, it takes you to, I am a pure soul. You see? Because when you spin all the colors, it doesn't turn dark, it turns white. Let's see. And then the other thing that you have in Hindu bhakti is the description of Krishna. He is called Sham Sundar. And in all the Murlis it says he's the beautiful and the ugly, but that's a euphemism. Because the reality is Sham means black and Sundar means white, right? But if you're deep, 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 deep down racist, you don't want to say that. So they say, well, let's make it beautiful and ugly. But if you see a picture of Krishna, even with a black face or a dark blue face, he's still beautiful, right? So what is this? And what's ugly anyway? And there's Shankar and Parvati. Same thing. She's called Gauri, right? Gauri means white. Shankar always dark blue. So it's about this extreme difference between the perfect state and the imperfect state, which is anyway the basis of this concept of racism in the first place. Because it's there in the scriptures that what you want to be is white and you don't want to be black. So everybody said, oh, this is reference to skin. But it's not. It's a reference to how bright is the soul. Because the soul is light, is either bright or dim, which they say, okay, that's black and white, or is pure or impure, The black is used for iron, you see, because if you have iron, it's black. And if you have copper, it's copper colored. If you have silver, it's silver colored. And if you have gold, it's gold colored. So it's all about colors. And then if you have diamond, which is the confluence age, it's called diamond age. So diamond is completely transparent. See? And if you put any light on a diamond could be cut in a number of different ways, but the old ancient diamonds from way back when, they were all cut cabochon cut. Have you seen that cabochon cut diamond? That's very interesting. Cabochon is like an egg, smooth and oval form. And what happens if you shine a light on a cabochon cut gem, you get a little star in it. And so when they started to worship the Shivling in Bhakti, what I had heard is they created this Kohinoor, like this cabochon cut, rather large diamond. I don't know how many carats, but kind of big. And they held it up, suspended in midair through some magnets or something like this. And this light inside, I mean, what a nice thing to meditate on. So this is what the original Kohinoor was that. Then they broke it up and it became a little bit here and a little bit there. But originally, Kohinoor means light of the world. And so these are all memorials of the soul, the supreme soul, and the cycle going all the way from the brightest to the darkest, the most beautiful to the most ugly, the whitest to the blackest, etc., is all about the process of change in the soul, which Baba mentions as Sato Pradhan, Sato Rajo Tamo, Tamo Pradhan. And in Hinduism, there's many different ideas. So there's some school of thought that says there's no such thing as Sato Rajo Tamo for souls. And Shiv Baba says, yeah, there is. And you are right now Tamo Pradhan, Shudra level, and I have come to make you Sato Pradhan, deity. And if you say yes, when you meet Shiv Baba, if you say yes, it means what? It means on some level, you know it. It is so. You see? So intuitively you say yes, but cognitively you say, oh, I can't there. You know, it's not very good for my dignity. And so he says, well, anyway, I'm here to take out your ego. So if you don't like it, it's a good sign, because you're going to have to come to terms with it. And it's difficult for a person to come to terms with something like that because it goes against the grain so much. But yet, he says, well, you need to be able to do this, because if you don't do this, you will not be able to be stable. But if you do this, then you're invincible, because you will not have any ego, because ego is basically the superiority, inferiority flip-flop that goes on, you know. And what he said to us as a sign of ego is if something is said to you and you feel insulted. So if God says to you, would you please accept that you are a Shudra, you will feel insulted. Isn't it? I think so. You'll say, I'm not. You see, so then it comes denial. And denial is something that you have when you just don't want to accept the truth or face the truth or in any way deal with it. And then you cannot become free as long as there's denial. So these two ends of the spectrum, and he'll say to you, okay, I want you to tell publicly that you're a deity. I use it, no, that deity. No. So look, I'm God and I'm telling you, so you have to do it. Well, you know. And then he'll say the same with Shudra, you see. So we can't go either side, because one is too high and the other is too low. And we are more comfortable being in the middle. But then he says, okay, then you can't study with me in that case, because it means, you know, you don't know who you are. So he tells this pretty much in every Murli. And people like this expression, okay, you are Swadarshan Chakradhari. That's like nice, because you're like Krishna, so that's pretty good. Vishnu, nice. But when you go into the details, oh, no, we can't really say that. So he tells us again and again for 1,000 years, right? Every day feels like 1,000 years, right? Until you finally start thinking about it. Okay, no, what is this? Because he says you must spin the cycle. And when you are fixed in a particular sense of self-identity, that's fixed. It's not moving. But the This thing of concentration, what I was saying earlier, to be really concentrated and make a really nice small hole somewhere, you have to have a drill, which is going round and round and round, high speed. And then you'll make a nice hole in the wall or a hole in someone's tooth or whatever it happens to be. Zzzt. So spinning is really very important for concentration as well as for balance. And so to concentrate upon the self in a way that he wants us to do it, we have to spin the cycle until it becomes a tiny, tiny point. Because he says the form of the soul is a tiny point, infinitesimally tiny point. And he wants us to concentrate on this tiny point of light, and then we will be able to go from the dimension of matter outside the dimension of matter to another dimension, which is the dimension of the soul world. Because the interesting analogy for that is your eye. You have all eyes, right? And in your eye, you have a pupil. And on the back of your eye, you have a retina, which shows everything upside down. But your brain conveniently puts it back the right way up. And so optics is interesting because photograph also, you have to get an image through a very small hole and then you see it on the other side of the thing. So you have a camera obscura. Have you seen this camera obscura? Here and there you find them. They're like little domes, a little hole, and then you look inside and you can see what's behind you. And this very small point of light that is the soul contains the totality, the full recording of your whole performance through the 84 births, all the way from being a deity to the Kshatriya, to the Vaishya, to the Shudra, all the way to being this, which is the Brahmin. So the Brahmin bridges the state of being Shudra to deity. And so when you're in the confluence age, you are activating the aspects of yourself that are perfect, and you're also activating your dark side. And you have to flip-flop between those two, and it's enough to make you crazy, right? So in order to not be crazy, you have to spin this, and in the process of spinning it, think about yourself to the point where you're able to really accept your greatness, very, very highest greatness, and lowest of the lowness, you can say. And keep that moving in such a way that there is basically no difference between your highness and your lowness, your brightness and your darkness. It's all so fast that it all becomes one thing. And that one thing is you. And when you spin all those things, you get white, which is a symbol of purity. So the soul, who is Swadarshan Chakradhari, is conscious of being pure, including the purest of the pure and the impurest of the impure. And so the process of getting to that point is a process of becoming stable. And then you'll say, well, what about the 5 vices? And he will say, what about the 5 vices? That's not really part of that particular equation. The 5 vices is, if you say, okay, greed, anger, lust, attachment, ego, that's what you're used to. And then you have the other 5 things, which is called purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. It's also 5. And the soul is made of that. And if you look at anything material, especially a human body, it's made of air, earth, fire, water, and ether. So these 5 vices are directly a product of identifying with and perceiving reality as air, earth, fire, water, and ether, because it's about pain and pleasure. Or another way of putting it, Maya is about attraction and repulsion. Or another way of putting it is attraction and terror. Daddy Yankee used to always say, Maya is not the 5 vices, it's attraction and terror. So whatever you perceive through your sense organs impacts your consciousness, either from all the way to most attractive to most terrifying. So you have this spectrum. And in terms of the cycle, all the way from deity all the way to Shudra, it is the same full spectrum. And so soul consciousness is to be neutral in the face of all of these perceptions. So Raj Yoga is very much talking to us about perception, different ways of perceiving. And what is the meaning of perceiving material reality and why that is deceptive? It's because it makes us fixed in somewhere on this spectrum. Whereas when you are in soul consciousness and you are independent of sense perception, then you perceive reality, and reality is this big spectrum, all the way gold, silver, copper, iron, and then there's diamond. And your relationship with the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is equanimity. So in yoga, you want to have a mentality that is equanimity. Equanimity means your feeling about everything is you are stable. So in the Gita, it speaks about the pairs of opposites. So pleasure, pain is one of them. Then he says you have to be equal in fame and defamation. So what people generally prefer is they like the positive end of the spectrum and they don't like the negative end of the spectrum. So you're quite happy to have name and fame, but then you don't want to be defamed. So that if someone comes along and says something that you don't like because it's defamation, then you get out of order, emotionally disturbed. Which means that you are not equal in fame and defamation. And so you can be destabilized. But if you are equal in fame and defamation, then you're stable. So very much the description of the practice of a yogi is that you are equal in the face of the pairs of opposites. So fame and defamation is one, success and failure is another one. And there's a whole series of these pairs of opposites. And while we are in the confluence age and we're doing Sahaj Raj Yoga, right? Which everybody thinks means easy Raj Yoga. So I said, many people ask me, what's easy about easy Raj Yoga? And I say, yeah, you're right. We have to check this out. What is really easy about easy Raj yoga? So now in the old days, there wasn't anything like this, but now the internet is very user friendly for BKs. And one good thing it has is Sanskrit dictionaries online, very useful. So you look up most of these complicated words that come in the Murli, and you find that there can be 70, 80, 90 different meanings of a single word. And one of those is Sahaj. And one of the meanings of Sahaj is easy. But there's another one, there's lots of meanings, but there's one that I found that caught my eye, and I thought, yeah, this is really what he's talking about. The Sahaj means you're in the context of people. And, when he's talking to us about Sahaj Raj Yoga, it's usually in comparison with the Raj Yoga of the sannyasis, right? And that they are doing Hatha Yoga, and we are doing Raj Yoga, Sahaj Raj Yoga, and they are doing Hatha Yoga. And we are in Pravruti Marg, and they are in Nirvruti Marg. That means Pravruti Marg means you're in the middle of the family, Lokik family, BK family, work family, all lots of different people. And anytime you're in a context of people, you're in the middle of idiosyncrasies. Idiosyncrasies means everybody's like really, really different. And some people have such characteristics that you scratch your head and you say, what is this? I've never seen any kind of character like this before. That's called an idiosyncrasy. And so here we are in the middle of all these people who are ultra, ultra different from each other and ultra different from me, you see, because all these BKs, they have 84 births worth of idiosyncrasies, plus karmic accounts. It's very complicated. And you try and harmonize with one of these, or 20 of these, or 50 of these, or 100 of them. Or if you live in Madhuban, you got a couple of thousand idiosyncratic ancient souls who are all trying to become nice and harmonious. That's a big deal, to do that. So Sahaj Raj Yoga means this. You're in this context of people, and so it isn't easy. The Hatha yogis are not in the context of people because they go away from their families and they go off into the jungle and they do various exercises and pranayama and so on. And they plan on going to nirvana and not coming back. Whereas we have a different plan. We plan on harmonizing with all these unharmonizable people and coming back and living with all these people forever. Which is 5,000 years again and again indefinitely. So that, obviously we're completely crazy, but that's okay. And Shiv Baba says, well, I'm a family man and this is my family and there's lots of people in it. So you've all got to be harmonious, otherwise the family house will not be good. And so he says, the way that you do it is you become free. So he says, the inheritance I give you is this knowledge. Most BKs do not think that the inheritance is the knowledge. They think the inheritance is a few golden palaces and plenty of vimans and stuff like that. That is not our inheritance. Those things are the consequences of how we use our inheritance. But our actual inheritance is the wealth of knowledge. And very often Baba says, each of these Mahavakya, these are worth millions of rupees. So that means that the knowledge itself is the inheritance. And it's really all about learning how to use it such that you get free, you stay free, you get awake, you stay awake, and you achieve perfect stability. And this is also represented in the form of Vishnu. And because Vishnu is the symbol in the middle of the Trimurti, the symbol of the consequences of this threefold effort. So you have Brahma, you have Vishnu, you have Shankar. And every single one of us is a little Brahma, a little Vishnu, and a little Shankar, right? So what that means is, as a Brahmin, we have to study, and we have to simplify, and we have to meditate. So that means a meditation means that you are extracting everything that shouldn't be there. And as a Brahmin student, you are accumulating everything that should be there. And the result of having everything that should be there and nothing that shouldn't be there, you become the perfectly balanced Vishnu. And Vishnu is an androgynous symbol because it's the symbol of Lakshmi and Narayan both together. And, you know, you have 42 male births and 42 female births, so you need to be balanced, masculine, feminine. And he has these ornaments. This cycle is one of them. And the cycle represents that your mind is pure. And a pure mind means, you see, the mind is where your emotions happen, right? And the soul is represented by the candle who is not moving. And if the candle moves, it means there's some wind around. So your emotions are like wind in the soul. And to have a stable, steady stage, you have to be free from the impact of the emotions that could be triggered by different sense perceptions, which will either make you feel very good or very bad. And so these emotions are triggered by a sense perception. And then he says, why don't you have super sensuous joy, ati indriya sukh, right? What's that? Ati indriya sukh. It means that you, what he said in the Murli today, you churn the knowledge and it will bring you into a state of ecstasy, which has no connection with any sense perception. Sukh in that case is ecstasy. And that is this highest stage of yoga, which comes from understanding the totality, which comes from accepting all these four stages, deity, kshatriya, vaishya, shudra, brahman, and you are totally in ecstasy because you've got it. This is me. And you're stable, and this is it. And if somebody doesn't like it, it's too bad because you're stable, and that's it. You're free. This is the freest that is possible. It's much more free than being in nirvana, because when you're in nirvana, you're not experiencing anything at all. So those hatha yogi sannyasis cannot have what we have, but they don't know, so they don't mind. But this stage of this perfect balance, this, I think, is what he means by jivan mukti in a second. Because once you've got your, have you tried these Chinese plates, spinning the Chinese plates? They have a little rim, you have a stick and you spin them, and then there's a little bit in the middle. And when the thing is rotating really nicely and your stick is just in the middle in the pivot, and then you like that. And there are, acrobats who have all these plates that they spin and keep them in the air and this and that. And this is all symbolic of how we handle all the troubles of the world through this exceptional weapon of the Swadarshana chakra, you see. And so then you're stable. But being still and rigid, that's hatha yoga. And so, there's a lot of BKs with a lot of different opinions about what's what. You must have seen that. So you have to arrive at your own conclusions, because everybody has the same information and then everyone processes it differently. And this is why he calls it number wise. But your highest number comes from when you really do the work of churning, spinning the knowledge around in your intellect, and really going into the depth of the murlis, which we get every day, and which he really says, now you study this material, because if you move it around in your intellect, you will find stuff that nobody else can find, because you have got the third eye. And he says, I know you got the third eye because I gave it to you. But do you keep it open? Do you close it? Do you know how to use it? And the third eye is that instrument of perception that allows you to perceive reality, which is outside material reality. And it is not possible for a human being to perceive all of their births in the material dimension, because it is impossible for you to grasp these different states of being from Sato Pradhan all the way to Tamo Pradhan. It's out of reach, completely out of reach. It's possible you may experience a vision of yourself as a deity. And when you experience yourself as a deity in a vision, it is very, very surprising. Because you know it's you, but you didn't normally feel like that as you. So these visions can be very helpful, because they actually project you into a state of being which you can't otherwise experience. So that's useful. So he does sometimes give visions to enable a person to understand viscerally what he's telling theoretically. You know what I mean? So this is useful. Anyway, so these are a few thoughts about being stable. And so I think I'll stop, and we'll have just a few moments of meditation. And if you can just think for a while about spinning this cycle in your mind, and really the cycle. Well, I didn't tell you about the other cycle, did I? Which you all know, but I'll just remind you quickly. And that is the 5 forms. The 5 forms means the point, and then the deity, and then the worship worthy, and then the Brahmin, and then the angel. These are the 5 forms. And so he said, okay, if you can't do those 4, you do these 5. And these 5, each one of them is a state of perfection. The point is perfect. The deity is perfect. You probably don't really know how to be a worship-worthy deity as compared with an actual deity. Am I right? Yeah. So what happens in the ancient ways when you build a statue of a deity? It's a statue until certain rituals are performed, and then it becomes a deity, because you have to bring the soul of the deity into that statue, you see, otherwise it's not a deity, right? So that's what you are in your perfect form. In the Copper Age, when they start making these images, these idols, they do it to pull the soul of that deity into that statue. Otherwise, there's no point in worshipping a statue. It doesn't make any sense. But what you're worshipping is the spirit who is pulled into that statue. And so this is the thing about Hinduism. It's all about ancestors. And the ancestors are the deities. And they aren't around anymore, but the spirits are there. And they have reincarnated as us, right, basically. So we don't look like deities right now. Right? We're just normal, basic people. But when you're going through the 5 forms, you can understand point of light, and you can understand deity in the golden age. But this copper-aged, worship-worthy deity is the spirit of the deity that is experienced by the devotees, the spirit of the ancestor. And the ancestor's condition, when they're perfect, is remembered then and invoked. You see, this is what that's about. And then you go all the way and you become a Brahmin. Now, you are not a perfect Brahmin right yet, right? But eventually you will be. So you know what a perfect Brahmin would be. And so that's another stage of perfection, because the Brahmin who does everything properly and perfect. And then that's Karmatite. And then you become the angel, right? So all of these 5 are all the same. But if you remember one thing, you become rigid. So he makes you go through these 5 so that you're still rotating, but you're still focused on the perfect, the 5 different attributes of perfection. And that will also do the job of getting you there. So these are the 2 Swadarshan chakras that you can rotate. And they're both equally valid. But the original one, all the way from deity to Shudra, is better because it very directly destroys your ego. Because you have to accept, I'm Shudra. And then you have to become deity. So you're going through all this process of becoming, and you're going from losing everything to gaining everything. And then when you're going through the 5 forms, you're in the perfect state at all times. It's a different type of Swadarshana chakra, but it is also Swadarshana chakra. And there, with that rotation of those 5, you get liftoff. And so then you can go to the soul world in meditation. Because when you go to the soul world, actually, then you won't experience anything. Because when you leave your body and return to the soul world, your soul becomes a seed. And seeds don't do anything, they just sit there. So when you're in the seed form in the soul world, there is no difference between 1 second or 5,000 years. It's timeless. And there's no space there. So you're literally and totally in suspended animation. So a lot of people think, oh, you know, when I go to nirvana, I can experience God. You can't. You can't experience anything at all. But you can experience God here by doing the things that he tells us so that we can get onto his level and so that we can find ourselves and make that contact, which is called yoga, and pull into ourselves his energy, his power, his purity, and get ourselves reset for the next cycle. And during the confluence age, because we do the study, because we do the yoga, because we do the pure karma, in all those, everybody's different. And so you get your status as a result of these 3 things in golden age, silver age, copper age, iron age, all the way through the cycle. Everything that you do in the confluence age will create your next cycle, all the details. And this is why it's very good to accept oneself, all the way from the best of the best to the worst of the worst, because anyway, you can't be other than yourself. That's the way it is. So when you have all these, you've embraced the whole thing, and you say, okay, the best thing there is that I am me. And when you get a realization like that, that's really good, because then you're really stable. And such stability, you're invincible. And then you are called a victorious jewel, because you don't have to fight. You won. And so there you are. You're like a fixed star. So I will stop there, and we'll just have a few moments of silence to really think about these things. And then there may be some questions and like that. Om Shanti.
In addition to Hinduism, other major religions are also very much caste-based.
Very much?
Caste-based.
Yeah.
In India and in many other countries, the notion that some people are superior than others persists. Also, a lot of spiritual leaders are from the higher caste. How do we use our language to reinforce that perhaps even Shudra is noble? Why do we use words such as Brahmin for elevating others, while we can continue to focus on the self in BK and spread soul consciousness? I am wondering about systems and social structures at large that don't serve many people.
Well, this is the problem because people really don't like if they're not on the top. If you're on the top, you don't see any problem. I don't see any problem. Someone down there, come. Um, we have this concept of equality. And I mentioned earlier that it's impossible to have democracy unless you believe in evolution. And in the same way, this hierarchy of humanity is an awkward thing because people, when they see someone in a high position behaving badly, they really don't like it because that person gets away with it. You see. And what happens is by the time we get to the Iron Age, everyone is very mixed up. And the people who are the highest among souls have reached a very ordinary stage. And then you get new souls coming in who are in a very high state of light. And so there are complicated spiritual laws that apply to all this, which is totally 100% unknown to normal people. They don't know that everyone is a soul. They don't know that by the time you get to this time, you cannot tell who's who. And they don't know the laws of karma. And they don't know so many things which cause a person to get born somewhere as opposed to somewhere else. They don't know the karma that any soul has done in any other life, which would cause them to be in a higher or lower or richer or poorer or healthy or unhealthy condition. They have no clue about this stuff because they know only what you can perceive with the senses. And so in India, when someone is born somewhere with wealth and good house and good health and good intelligence and beauty and blah, 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 they say, oh, good karma, right? And then when somebody is born with none of those things, they say, oh, bad karma. And it's really simplistic because the details, the complexities of it is just so complicated that very, very few people actually know it, but nobody knows it as well as Sheep Baba. He knows very well. And so historically, what happens as time goes by, you go from the golden age where everyone is in the position that corresponds to their soul to the Iron Age where everything looks really weird and incomprehensible. And so people try to sort it out by different means. And so they say, well, if all are brothers and all are children of God, then all are equal. The faulty logic. It actually doesn't follow. But people don't know that it doesn't follow. So they think it follows. And what Shiv Baba will say to us is, okay, you're all equally points of light, but beyond that, you're all different. Every soul has a number. No soul knows what their number is. And until you come to Gyan, you don't even get that you're an old soul. Or you might, but you wouldn't know any details. And then this is the world of a lot of negative karma. So you get people in positions of privilege. How did this social system get set up? according to my research, it gets set up in the beginning of the Iron Age. And what happens with people who find themselves in a privileged position is they do everything to make sure it stays that way. And they get into the ruler's position of the ruler, and they create laws that results in these things. And then you get people who maybe do the karma that will give them birth in a high caste, but then they got other karma that is quite negative. So they come in a high caste, they get lots of privilege and position, they do all kinds of bad things, which means their next birth will be way down the bottom. But you can't track people from birth to birth to birth unless you're a Buddhist yogi, because they can track quite well. And so it's very, very confusing. But once you come in Gyan, then you realize that the way the society is at the moment is, for us, it's a setup that gives us the possibility, whether it's good or bad doesn't actually matter really, but it matters what we do with it, how we work with it, and how we use it to our advantage. But see, people who are not in BK, they wouldn't learn all this stuff. So we cannot do something called spread soul consciousness. That's out of the question. You cannot do that. All you can do is suggest to people that it's a good idea, but then they have to understand it. And they wouldn't understand it unless they're quite a high-level soul. So it's very paradoxical and strange that we BKs think that we can make the whole world into BKs, because that's 100% impossible. So why are we doing this? And what exactly are we doing? So he says, okay, you have to give my message to everyone. And what is the message? So some time ago, somebody asked Baba, okay, what's the message? And his reply was, you are the message. Which is actually very interesting, because it's not about telling any information. It's about representing an idea, a vibration. It's about your being. As if somebody can feel what it feels like to be soul conscious, then they can get something. And if we can get a person to feel what it's like to be a soul and feel what it's like to receive some vibration from Shiv Baba, then we have conveyed the message. But he also says that, you who have studied all these things, who have done all this yoga and so on, you didn't do it for yourself. You did it because the other people need there to be people like this so that they can benefit. And sometimes he says you have to be a lighthouse. Sometimes he says you have to be a might house. And you have to reflect what God is, because you have been able to experience God directly. But there's very few who can do that. And those who can do that, they have to reflect to others. Because the representation of this, or the metaphor for this, is the moon, you see. You cannot sit and look at the sun unless it's really setting, and even then it's too bright. But you like the full moon, right? And what is the full moon? Is the reflected light of the sun. And you can sit there and look at the moon whole night and you won't go blind. You do that with the sun, you will go blind. And so we have to be these reflectors, and not just reflect light, but reflect the qualities and what it means to be connected with God. And you see, these castes and everything that we have in the world, these are set up by the religious authorities and the social leaders and so on. And they made it rigid 1,000 years ago. And it didn't go very well. It really didn't, because they didn't know the laws of spirituality. They didn't know the laws of karma. They didn't know who's who. So they did what they did, and that's fine. But now we have a world which is getting more and more unstable. And it seems that we're heading to a world which is somewhat anarchical. Anarchy, you know what is anarchy? Anarchy means there is no rule of law. There's no rule of anything. It's very, very chaotic. So you go from a kingdom to a democracy, to a dictatorship, to anarchy, to total death. That's the progression. And as you very, very slowly go down this road, everything is confusing, and it doesn't, you can't find any logic to it. You object to it. You have revolutions. You remove this government and that government, and you set up different ideologies and so on. But it doesn't change the fact that there is devolution. And coming to terms with this gives you a sense of why things are the way they are. And somebody might like that idea or not like that idea. But this is what he's telling us. This is the way the world is. And it is, if you got everybody to be equal, then we'd all be clones and it would be dead boring. So I don't think we want that. Imagine everybody's equally useless or equally brilliant. Nothing will happen, you know. And so he says it's a variety, it's a play. There's actors, some are bigger, smaller, stronger, weaker, and everybody is utterly different. He says no two faces are the same, neither in the present time nor in any other time. And your face is a reflection of your karma also. And that's the way it is. And somebody might disagree, but it doesn't matter. It's still the way it is. I don't know if that answered his question or her question.
So my question is, when we shift our consciousness from body to the soul, we move into this dimension, as you said, the dimension of the light in which Shiv Baba exists. And as we shift into this dimension, we experience the soul world right then where you are. So does and you also experience that in the soul world you don't have space and time. So can you say that the soul world and the corporeal world coexist? Because as you shift your consciousness, you experience the soul world, or are you just invoking that experience which is recorded in the soul?
Well, he tells us there are three worlds: soul world, subtle world, material world. And they coexist at all times. Then he says he creates the subtle region in the confluence age, which is his architect's drawings and all that. But otherwise, the subtle region is the region of thought. And the soul world is the region of non-material reality. And so, you know, there is a case for saying that the sixth element of light is that dimension where souls can live, which is non-matter. And the total reality, he says, the reality is there's the material world, the world of the mind, and the world of silence. Nirvana is there. Nirvana means there is no sound, even the sound of a thought. In the subtle regions, there's the power of thought and mental images. In the material world, there's sense perception. If you look at it from the angle of science and quantum physics and all that, they will tell you something pretty similar, that all this is just energy. And how it seems depends on you. And what you also know from Gyan is that it is not possible for you to perceive anything anywhere except in your mind. It seems like we're in a room together and there's people over here and there's me over here and then there's things, you know, around, there's geography and everything. But the only way that I know it is it's registered in my mind through my eyes and ears and all that. But if you don't have any eyes and ears or any of that, you cannot be aware of material reality. And I checked, I interrogated somebody who'd been blind from birth to try to ascertain what is his relationship with visual phenomena. And he could not imagine what it would be like to see. Could not imagine color or shape or distance. Out of the question, you know. And so, yeah, they coexist, but it's a question of access. So when we become soul conscious, it's not really an experience, although all the BKs keep talking about experience and all that. But experience is very misleading because it's very subjective. And anyway, anything that you can perceive through your sense organs is what they call objective reality, which is anyway totally subjective. So the concept of objective reality is questionable. And once you start thinking about things in this way, you realize that everything is very, very subjective. And then you have to distinguish between, is it real or is it imaginary? Because people think objective reality is real and subjective reality is imaginary, but that's not actually true. Because all forms of reality are subjective. But we have to be able to talk about it. So there have to be things in common. Otherwise, you can't communicate about it. So this knowledge that he gives us is only comprehensible to some people, not to all people. And how come we think that we can understand it is because we get it on some level, and it's all very number wise. So we have to think about it, and we have to think about what this knowledge is and why we have it and what are we going to do with it. And so then everything comes down to your motivation. And that's a very important thing. Why do you do what you do? Why do you say what you say? Just why, the motivation. So in my thinking, I think that there's a hierarchy of motivation also. And then he talks about Prit Buddhi Vijanti and Viprit Buddhi Vinashanti, means if you have love for God in your intellect, you will be victorious. If you have hatred for God in your intellect, you will be destroyed. And what's this? That's a very strong statement. And you have to figure it out. So you want to kind of get everything to its deep answer to the question, what's the point? You see, because this is the question people ask. What's the point? If everything is identically repeating, what's the point? A very important question, which, difficult to answer. And of course, the point is you are the point. And your question is, who am I? And his answer is, you are you. And then you say, what do I do with that? Because you're used to everything is all about you do something to get something, which is all very limited. So to go into the unlimited is a big deal. You want to be able to comprehend existence. You want to be, up there with the Plato and all these people, who even then. So he says, be Bap Saman, be like the Father. So be like God. How do I be like God? That's very confusing. Because we don't know what God is like. You have this religious idea of God, which has nothing to do with what he's really like. And then he tells you stuff which is difficult to compute because your intellect is linear. And he says linear thinking is body consciousness. And circular thinking is soul conscious. So then you say, what's that? You see, this is a very complicated, not in the least bit easy Raj Yoga, but it goes by the name of easy Raj Yoga. It's okay. So if it wasn't this complicated, we couldn't sit here thinking about it endlessly, day and night, for an entire lifetime. But that's what we do. And he says, it's beant. It doesn't have, you can't put a line around it and say, this is it. You can only do that for human concepts. Then you have to think, okay, I am studying with a non-human. You see, so it's pretty mysterious. But here we are, we're doing it. And we come again tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and we carry on. And gradually something gets clear in our understanding, but it takes time. And then tomorrow we will do secure. How do you become secure with all of these mysteries? Om Shanti.